Ghosts, and the way in which we deal with them, are a part of a culture's folklore. Folklore means the customs and stories that a particular community may have. The customs and stories are passed down from generation to generation, and many of them have lasted still in some form or another in our modern society. For example, the kissing or touching of something for good luck, or the throwing of a pinch of spilled salt to dust the devil's eyes. When it comes to ghosts, boggarts, kelpies, banshees, and all other manner of creatures designed to either teach or deter man in life, Britain and its counties are a rich tapestry of ghosts, superstitions, myths and legends. In this episode, we are visiting the southeast of England. The southeast of England comprises Surrey, Sussex and Kent. The writer Dee Dee Chaney writes in her book A Treasury of British Folklore that Sussex particularly has a lot of superstitions relating to death lore. For example, 3 caws of a crow or the caw of a screech owl is a death omen. Will-o'-the-wisps are a forewarning of death, and a stopped clock that chimes twice is a warning to all. Our first visit is to Epsom in Surrey, where we visit Pitt Place, once the home of Lord Luttleton, who died there in November of 1779. The story told of Luttleton is that his death was predicted 3 days before his demise. This unfortunate foretelling came from none other than a ghost, and this very much upset the Lord. But he was in good health, a very, very robust man, in fact. That is, of course, right up until the moment of which was foretold, and he had a seizure, fell down, and passed away. At which moment he then became what is known as a crisis apparition, and he appeared at the bed of his good friend Miles Andrews. Andrews woke to find the ghost of his friend Luttleton wearing the bed clothing that were always provided for him when he came to stay at Andrews' place. When Luttleton had Andrew's attention, he said, "It's all up with me, Andrew," and then he walked into the wardrobe. A nice, dramatic exit to leave your bestie suitably freaked out, don't you think? Next, we fly to Rainham in Kent, where there is a legend of a very bizarre sounding haunting. Now, we're all familiar with the Headless Horseman or Headless Coachman and horses, but this story of such an event has its own little twist. The legend goes that the phantom coach leaves the church at midnight to begin its headless journey towards a particular house. This coach is pulled by headless horses, to whom control is given to a headless coach driver. Inside sits a headless man holding his head in his hands. The coach makes a stop once to water the horses, and as they do, a phantom old woman is seen sitting and spinning wool atop of a barn. What she has to do with the rest of the story never becomes clear. The passenger of the ghost is whispered to be that of Christopher Bleur, a chap who was rumoured to be a bit of a Lothario, and it is to Bleur's place that the headless coach ends its journey. He earned his headless restlessness, it is said, by being offed by the offended husbands of the wives that he is rumoured to have plundered. They accosted him one night at midnight, cut off his head and spiked it up on the church tower. The truth is, though, that the records show that Christopher Bleur died peacefully in his bed, and there are no records of his wanton hussiness. A now long forgotten tradition of owners of Bleur's place was to leave out a glass of brandy for the headless ghost every Christmas Eve, and every Christmas morning the glass would be empty. The local policeman was spoken to about it, and he said, "It's a fact, but I blames the postman." Next stop on our ghostly journey, we arrive at Shepperton, Surrey, where the visage of a ghostly headless monk was purported to be seen. It was thought to be the spirit of a monk who had broken his vows in order to live a life with a shepherd's daughter. He was chased down and beheaded on his journey to a farm, and now his headless body is seen wandering through the houses and buildings that stand where once his love's father's farm had stood. Our last ghost story from the southeast comes from Walton-on-Thames in Surrey. where the ghostly Judge John Bradshaw or Chief Justice Jeffreys, the notorious bloody Assizes arbitrator, is reported to haunt a 14th century manor house. John Bradshaw was a Puritan barrister. He presided over the trial of Charles I and was partly responsible for the death sentence given to the disgraced king. He was buried at Westminster Abbey, but his body was dug up and hung up at Tyburn. This perhaps caused his restless soul to annoy the manor's household. Brighton in Sussex is a bright, modern, progressive seaside town, but there are some customs and traditions that have and will still remain part of Brighton's ancient folklore. Beachcombers will look for stones with holes in them because they are good luck. This is a very ancient tradition that goes as far back as about 5,000 years. A game known as Bat and Trap was played at the Level, a parkland area in Brighton, on Good Friday mornings. Bat and Trap is known as one of the world's oldest games, and through some strange, tenuous link, supposedly has its roots in a Celtic fertility rite. The game consists of a catapult-like device, the trap, that fires the ball into the air and is batted by a player. I can't put into words, without offending, the mental images the connection to this game and fertility conjures up, but I imagine that you can imagine. So sorry. Hastings is, of course, famous for boring most children in history class. But surely this next custom is legendary in itself for its misdirected pettiness. In the 9th century, the Danes were occupying Hastings, and early one morning they were inadvertently saved from harm by a treasonous cockerel. The group of rebels were sneaking upon the sleeping invaders when the cockerel gave the game away by noising it up. In revenge, the people of Hastings began a game called Cock in the Pot. This portrayal of pettiness comes in the form of stuffing a cockerel into an earthenware pot and throwing sticks at it until it breaks. Whoever broke the pot got to keep the cockerel. Because it makes sense to get a garden pet by abuse. In Heathfield, Sussex, April the 14th is Heffull, the old name for Heathfield Fair Day. Each fair, an old lady is said to release the first cuckoo of the year out of a basket. She has never been seen, but it is said to be lucky to hear the first cuckoo cry on that day. If you do, you should turn over the money in your pocket for extra luck. In Lewes, Sussex, November the 5th is a well-loved tradition. The people of Lewes were mainly Protestant, and during the time of Mary Tudor, a lot of the Protestant people of Lewes were burned at the stake. The resentment that brewed from such un-Christ-like behaviour found its release in the form of November the 5th. Even today, there are elaborate celebrations and ceremonies carried out at Lewes. Historically, groups would converge on the bridge and a blazing tar barrel would be thrown into the River Ouse. Those of you with a taste for ancient cultures will already have had their Celtic senses tingling here, as this custom is yet another form of rite for the Celts. This time the dousing of fire is a representation of the triumph of one season over another. In this case, winter overtakes summer. In the armoury of Arundel Castle resides a 5'9" sword named Morglay. Legend has it that the sword was owned by Bevis, a warden of the castle who was said to be so large in size that he could walk through the sea at Southampton to Cowes without getting his head wet. He established his place of burial by throwing his sword from the castle battlements. It pierced the ground half a mile away, and that is where a large mound is still known as Bevis's grave or thumb. Imagine being so chaste and so pure that the very idea of being soiled by the lord of the manor would cause you to drop dead at his very perverted feet. This is what is said to have happened to a village maiden that caught the attention of the improper chap. He was so horrified by her deathly disgust that he stabbed himself in the stomach, and his blood dramatically ran over a rock that stood beside the nearby stream. The rock was then said to ooze the guilty lord's blood. Another legend has a beastie involved in the redness of this rock. The stream is home to a water horse called the Buckland Shag, who bloodies the rock by murdering innocent travellers upon it. His reign of terror was long and strong until one brave vicar exorcised the Buckland Shag with a bell, book and candle ritual and banished it to the Red Sea, a place where ghosts, goblins and other creatures are frequently dumped like rubbish. There is a cave near Waverley Abbey that is deep and dark. It was once the home of a white witch known as Mother Ludlam. Locals would go to the cave at midnight and seek from the White Witch loan of something which they needed, with the imploration, "Good Mother Ludlam, lend me and I will return it within 2 days." The next morning, the item that was to be borrowed would be at the mouth of the cave. But the people's good and easy ride was over when someone failed to bother to return a cauldron that had been borrowed. This upset the witch and she ceased to loan anything out. When the cauldron was finally returned, she cut her witchy nose off to spite her face and refused its ownership. It was taken to Waverley Abbey and then to Frensham Church, which is now its home. Knucker Hole is a deep pool 150 yards northwest of Lyminster Church Wall. Tradition maintains that the pool is the lair of a dragon who would only eat the fair ladies of the region. When these feminine delicacies ran out, all but one maiden was left. That was the daughter of the King of Sussex. So what does the king do? He removes her autonomy and freedom by offering a hand in marriage to the tin-covered hero who could slay the dragon. And of course, as always in these stories, the big bad beastie was bested by a handsome, brave and victorious knight who married the lady fair and settled down to own the surrounding lands. A stone slab in the north transept of the church is known as Slayer's Stone, and it is said to belong to the serpent-stabbing knight. A transept, for the curious, is one of the arms of a cross-shaped church. So that was a look at some of the ghosts, superstitions, myths and legends from the southeast of England. Next episode is going to be the south of England, so if you have any of your legends, myths, ghost stories, etc. from the south of England, pop them into the comment section and I will include them in the next video. If you have any of the same kind of stories from your part of Britain, also pop them in the comment section and I'll include them in their video. In the meantime, thank you very, very much for watching or listening. I do appreciate it. It did take some time to do this video this time around, so I appreciate the watch time, really. So yeah, alright, well, I hope everybody's well and you're doing okay in these silly times. I won't waffle on. I'll just say again, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.